The average car is parked 95% of the time. A third of the world's food is wasted, and the average power drill is only active for 13 minutes of its lifespan. Clearly, there is potential and opportunity to share. It could even help us build communities, reduce waste and emissions. But what are people willing to share? What factors make sharing initiatives succeed? And who are the key actors? This is episode 44 of the Urban Lunch Talk series on sharing the city circular lifestyles in practice. I'm Jakob Schabus. I work for IQ Samhällsbyggnad, the Swedish Center for Innovation and Quality in the Built Environment. And I also work for the Driving Urban Transitions Partnership and have the great pleasure of moderating the conversation today. Today, we will discuss various sides of sharing, and we have experts joining us with expertise in the subject and with a background in research and innovation. In alphabetical order, we have Cristina Villano. She is research fellow at the University of Turin and project manager at the DUT Corpus project. Welcome, Cristina. Then we have Maria Jose Zapata Campos. Maria is senior lecturer at the University of Gothenburg, and she's also the coordinator at the DUT Circular Grassroots project. We have Przemek Kluczynski. He is adjunct professor at the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan and also involved in the DUT Transcale project. And last but not least, we have Robert Boyer, research manager at RISE and coordinator of the DUT CD Cool project. A warm welcome to all of you. And before we begin, I would like to mention that this webinar is being recorded. It will be published on our YouTube channel in a couple of days' time and also be shared with everyone who is present here today. And I would also like to encourage you all to pose your questions and thoughts in the chat, as we will devote some time to them towards the end of this webinar. With that, let's get started with a round of introduction. I would like to hear a bit more about your backgrounds, your projects, and passions. And we're going again in alphabetical order, starting with Cristina. Cristina, you are an intertransdisciplinary researcher and part of the Corpus project, which is all about communities reclaiming the city. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for inviting me here today. I'm a researcher in an interdisciplinary research group at the Computer Science Department of the University of Turin, and specifically have a background in urban studies, geographies, with a focus on digital platform for participation and collaborative economies, which is the main research object of our group. In the Corpus project, we deal with circular urban economies. In this project, we refer to circular lifestyles such as maker spaces, where the technique like the upcycling of materials are used to create, to renovate urban equipments. And on the other hand, we also refer to sharing economies, and in particular to the model of the libraries of things. In both cases, we work to participatory co-design methodologies together with the other partner of this project. And we also experiment a blockchain-based wallet application, the digital tool, where digital tokens, cryptographic tokens, are oriented to support collaboration and participatory practices as a form of local currency.
Excellent. Looking forward to hearing more about your work. Next, we have Maria Jose Zapata Campos. Maria, you research, amongst other things, organizing environmental sustainability in cities, and you coordinate the Circular Grassroots project, which examines challenges and opportunities for grassroots initiatives. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jacob. Our project brings a group of researchers from different cities that have been engaged, most of them in action research in these different settings. So, for example, we have our colleagues from Barcelona that have been engaged as activists as well in the repair movement, repair electronic devices, helping creating the movement in Barcelona and studying the movement since its creation. We have colleagues in France, in Nantes, that are working with food circularities. In Amsterdam, we have colleagues engaged in post-growth research, working with the urban planning and involved in a housing cooperative since the very design of the housing, following this community and with participatory research. And in Gothenburg, we are very much working with this sharing economy in the city since more than 12 years in different projects. So that's kind of ethnographic and action research that is brought together in this circular grassroots.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then, Przemek, you work on a variety of research topics from social movements to urban sociology, and you're involved in the DOT Trans Scale project, which is all about scaling local sharing initiatives. Przemek, could you tell us a little bit more about your work?
Of course. Przemysław Pluciński at Mickiewicz University, Faculty of Sociology. I indeed deal with social movements, bottom-up engagements, and their role in sustainability transition, as well as knowledge circulation or co-production and relations between academia and social movements or bottom-up initiatives. I represent the Transcale project. The leader is Yanis Brizga from Latvia, from Riga. I am the PI for Polish group, Poznań, Poland. We also have partners from Norway, from Oslo, from NIFU, the Research Institute, as well as from Copenhagen, Denmark. The project is about sharing and circular economy initiatives. We investigate construction waste management, sharing and use, food sharing, and repair practices similar to Maria. These are repair cafes Denmark, and they're really big network, countrywide network. I also run the other EU-funded project, Transfer Demo, which is more about contentious politics around sustainability transition.
Looking forward to hearing more about both of them. Then again, last but not least, Robert, you are an urban planner with a passion for sharing, and you coordinate the DOT CD Cool project, which tests the willingness to share space. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work?
Sure. Thank you, Jakob. My name is Robert Boyer. I am a research manager at RISE Research Institutes of Sweden. I'm based in Gothenburg, but for those of you that aren't familiar with RISE, we are an organization with 3,000 employees. We are all over Sweden, and we work on all sorts of projects related to innovation in Sweden, and we, of course, have international projects. My DUT project is called CD Cool, which stands for Consumer Demand for Circular Urban Living. I'm very lucky to be collaborating with some brilliant collaborators in Sweden, of course, but then also at Maastricht University in the Netherlands and the Slovenian National Institute for Building and Civil Engineering in Ljubljana. Our project is looking at, as Jakob mentioned, willingness to pay for shared access residential spaces. So shared kitchens, shared workshops, shared office spaces that you share access to with your neighbors. And we're using choice modeling and focus groups to figure out what types of spaces are people interested in, and then what types of features in these spaces would stimulate people to pay more for them. So we're really trying to find a solution that works for the market, but works for everyday lives, and then hopefully reduces the consumption of material and energy resources.
Fantastic. And both the benefits and the willingness are issues we want to speak about in just a moment. Now, I would like to start our conversation today by giving each of you a sentence to give our audience a taste what this is all about. And you will all get the opportunity to finish one sentence each. So, Robert, I will stick with you. Your sentence is the most important thing with sharing initiatives is. So, what's the most important thing?
That it brings people together.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Then, Maria, next to you, a big challenge for sharing initiatives is.
Definitely, we need a space for people being brought together, non-commercialized space in city centers, particularly.
Space, one of the key challenges for many, many cities in Europe. Then, Przemek, to you, what inspires me about sharing initiatives is.
This is dedication, which is rooted in a value-driven approach of the actors we study.
Excellent. Thank you, Przemek. And last but not least, Christina, your sentence is a surprising thing with sharing initiatives is.
Diversity of creative ways through which a group of people use both personal interaction and digital tools for finding new ways for sharing.
Excellent. Thank you all, and thank you for giving us a glimpse of our topic, which we're gonna deep dive into now. Now, when talking about sharing initiatives, I wonder, who are we talking about here? Who is it who's actually interested in sharing initiatives? If I could maybe pass that on to you, Maria.
Yeah, thank you. That's not an easy question to answer because it is an heterogeneous group. And in the literature, we depict them as having flexible identities, so blended rationals, or even as lifestyle movements, because they could bring together people who are interested in social questions like socializing with others, being together with others. But they could also include people who are definitely interested in environmental issues, in doing something good for the environment, more like ideologically interested. And then we also have people who are interested in the material component and the material reward of sharing, because you are saving, for example, money when you are accessing food or when you are sharing toys or tools, etc., etc. And I always tell this anecdote when I was conducting some fieldwork years ago, when I started getting involved in the sharing initiatives in Gothenburg. I was at one of the rescue bikes day at the University of Chalmers, where students were organizing. They were collecting thousands of bikes that were abandoned and that would have been sold as scrap. And then they put them together in the campus. And I was helping them to collect these bikes because the day after they would be given to the students, but the students would have to learn how to repair them, and then they would be given the bike. So the thing is that when I was asked, when I was there and I saw all these thousands of bikes, and maybe without being locked for the day after, I was asking one of the students organizing the event, like, but you are not concerned about someone coming here and stealing the bikes? And then she said something, well, even if it's stolen, we have achieved the purpose, which is that someone is using the bike. So that really made me think, like, it's even a thief, someone that can contribute can be an environmental steward. So a little bit, that's the thing. You have social, environmental, economic purposes, many different reasons.
Perfect. So a really broad variety, and I hear you say that there is some people who engage because they think it's important, but there can of course also be just incentives to engage there. Robert, was there something you wanted to add to what Maria said?
Absolutely. The CD Cool project, this is the main question that we're asking is, first of all, who's interested in sharing spaces with their neighbors? And then who and for what are they willing to pay? And what Maria said is actually supported by the data that we've collected. We've collected surveys from thousands of people in Sweden, Slovenia, and the Netherlands. And to quickly summarize who is interested in sharing, we find what I call the 3 E's. right? So the first E is environmental efficacy, meaning people that believe that sharing is good for the environment are almost everywhere and for every service interested in sharing. The second one is extroversion. People that are extroverted are more interested in sharing than introverts. And then the last E is so the environmental efficacy, extroversion, and experience. People that have experienced sharing before, that have done it at some point in the past, are more interested in doing it in the future. In terms of economic data, our findings are really interesting. What we found is that when we divide up the populations of these countries into four groups, from low income to high income, it's the middle income groups that are most interested in sharing, rather than the lowest or the highest. We're not exactly sure how to interpret that, but what we're seeing is that the lowest income groups are not necessarily more interested in sharing, and neither are the highest income groups, with some exceptions. So there's of course more to that data, and we have an article that will hopefully be published soon describing that. But yeah, I can back up what Maria is saying.
Excellent. Looking forward to that article, and that sounds like there is just a specific group interested, but once people try sharing, they stick to it. They realize, oh, this is a good thing for me.
This is a really good and interesting finding. We didn't take for granted that experience with sharing would mean positive attitudes about sharing. In fact, when we conducted focus groups and asked people about sharing a kitchen with their neighbors, a lot of people had memories of terrible experiences where they're in university, where their roommates didn't clean up after themselves or stole their food. So we were expecting that we would get people that had bad experiences not wanting to share, but the data shows otherwise. The data is showing us that people that have shared before are interested in sharing later, which I think is a really optimistic finding.
Absolutely a positive message. Maria, I see you have raised your hand.
Thank you, Robert. That is really interesting. Conducted also some surveys, for example, here in Gothenburg, among people who are participating in these collective sharing initiatives, like, for example, food sharing initiatives, but also libraries of things and People's Kitchen. And it's interesting because that somehow not contradicts, but probably nuances some of your results, Robert. Like,
Yeah.
it is true that when it comes to libraries of things, it's more like a middle class thing. Most of the participants do have like middle high income, are Swedish born, so middle class. While people participating in food sharing initiatives, it's like majority, they have a subsidy as a main economic subsidy, as a main source of income, and not a job. Most of them are also from other countries. So we are talking about people who have a material need, and they engage into this activity because of many of them, because of the material need, but then the environmental reasons and the social reasons also show up in order to reinforce. So it's quite interesting how it depends on how we define sharing, what kind of groups we will find that are the people.
Excellent. Thank you, Maria, for those nuances. I wonder now, at the start of our discussion, I would just like to do a bit of a stock taking. What is it that we are talking about? And maybe you can add to what I say here. Now, food sharing, we've heard a few times, so I guess that is self-explanatory. But what other examples are there of sharing initiatives in your work? Przemek, would you like to chip in an example here?
Of course, we study food sharing in Poland, but colleagues in other cities study repair cafes mostly with electronic equipment and construction waste materials. This is in Riga and in Oscar and in Oslo, so in Norway. Yeah, so we investigate commonalities and differences between them, drivers and barriers. To find a common ground in the analysis, yeah, for them, even though they are different streams, yeah, so there are commonalities. So yeah, this is the core of our analysis.
Excellent. Thank you. And Christina, would you like to add some further examples of sharing in or outside of your research project?
I think that other interesting example, which often are
Mhm.
quite related to Library of Things, are the time banks. What I'm noticing in my research that usually the same, let's say,
Mhm.
people that were described before by Robert and Maria, which are interested in Library of Things, are also interested in making their time and skills available for other people of the community. Another very interesting example are co-working spaces. And I would like to mention, even if I know that many of us are working on urban topics, that there are also very interesting experimentation of co-working spaces in rural area. For instance, I'm referring here in Italy to mountain areas, which have slightly diverse needs and dynamics in terms of interaction and the kind of space that are looked for by people. As regards our work in our Corpus project, we are mainly focused, as mentioned before, with community labs, maker spaces, and library of things. And I would like to recall what was mentioned before in terms of the people interest, why we are also working on digital tokens and local currency to understand whether there can be some kind of incentives in a broad sense that can also attract or encourage other people that usually are left behind or are less interested in this kind of practices. For instance, people that are actually mainly looking for answering an economic need, integration to income, for instance. That's the kind of work that we are trying to do.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing on that, Christina. And I already saw that we have a question in the chat from Carla. And yes, we'll be happy to share links later on as well. So the question was, could it be that low-income groups are less likely to share because they would have to do so for financial reasons, or are afraid that others would think this of them and not primarily because of their motivation? I don't know if that's a question for you, Robert, but anyone who would feels like they have an answer. As I understand, that's maybe now going into speculating a bit, but answering, but maybe somebody has a thought. Maria, please.
Yeah, I also think that we need convenience and closeness. And we need to wonder where are these spaces where people are sharing things. So there is a need to bring these initiatives close to people. So where are they? Are they in central parts of the city and they are not reaching people who are living far away and have access to less resources, for example?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I can like you mentioned, Jakob, I can only speculate, but it could be that, and we are following up with this particular curiosity in our focus groups, that when we ask people, would you be willing to share a kitchen with your neighbors, that they don't like their neighbors, and it could be that low income, underserved respondents live in areas where they don't know or they don't like the neighbors that are near them. And this could have some kind of reason behind it. But that's one reason. But we don't have any way of knowing in our survey how people feel about the neighbors that they live around. So there could be something there that we haven't captured with the data that we've collected.
Excellent. I think it was Maria and then afterwards Przemek.
Yeah, I just would like to insist as well that in our study, I mean, it depends on how you define sharing, because in the food sharing initiative is the other way around. It's people who have less resources, the one who are willing to participate, not only to get the food, but also to actively participate in collecting and distributing. So it depends on what kind of sharing initiative.
Yeah, I think, Maria, from what I hear in the initiatives that you're studying, there people may or may not be sharing with with their immediate neighbors, right? So the initiative could be set up in the city, could be attracting people, and those people may be coming together because they have a common interest rather than having just been living in a common area. And so when we're comparing different sharing initiatives, this is one really important dimension, is the spatial dimension, and the people that may be sharing with you, and that could have an effect on people's willingness to share and willingness to pay, both good and bad.
Excellent. Przemek, please.
I could add on this. Of course, we don't have data to group people in terms of the income or class analysis, but earlier before I studied urban social movements, and there was a myth around urban social movements being middle class based, which is partly true. But in this particular case, food sharing initiative, I would say that these are not people of high income, I would say. Yeah. So the local champions who organized the initiative are more into symbolic and social capital, but not of high income. And the recipients, people who collect the food are most likely lower income groups. This is also locally specific. This is the district. The food is shared, but after all, this is more like a lower income and kind of a redistribution initiative.
Excellent. Maria.
Yeah, what we observed in the survey that we conducted in Gothenburg is that those participating in libraries of things or in the people's kitchen, they were coming from farther away than those that were participating in food sharing initiatives, for example. So that tells something.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we can distinguish between the kind of food sharing initiative we studied that have an environmental concern compared to those that are run by church organizations that are organized thing, and that unfortunately forces people driving from one part of the city to the other part of the city just to get food, which is a related issue. Yeah.
Excellent. Now we've with full speed already deep dived into the topic, which is fantastic. I do want to though take one step back and just ask you, what are actually the co-benefits of sharing? Because I think there is a variety of co-benefits. I've already talked a bit about them in the introduction. Christina, would you like to share some of those?
I think that we can, of course, very broadly, with a kind of generalization, refer to different category of benefits. One is can be saving money, because I get some things or services for free, or just lend them. Another category is concerned establishing relationship, which often I see in community-based project is rather the real objectives, and sharing things, material object, is just the starting point. Then there are other goals or values. I think Robert was mentioning some of them, such as the common interest of people involved in avoiding waste, avoiding consumerism. But here we are in the cases that Robert was mentioning, I think, where we refer to group of people that already share a common goals, common values and principles, and so forth. In one of the library of things we are working with in our project here in the city of Turin, they are one of the example where establishing and enhancing relationship and avoiding consumerism are two goals exactly at the same level. And that's why we are studying a system of incentives, of rewards that take into account these different kind of motivation and of needs that have to match together.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. Maria, was that an old hand or a new one?
It's a new one as well. No
Go
need.
ahead.
Thank you, Christina. It's very inspiring the work you are conducting, and it resonates with our study as well. I can say that based on the survey that we conducted, we observed these blended rationales for people participating, as you were saying, the money, the relationships, the environment, but different sharing initiatives have different rationales that predominate and different benefits in the way they are perceived. So what we observed is that in the food sharing economy, it's a little bit more important than environment. Then we could discuss that environment becomes also important later. In the libraries of things, the environment is more important than the other two. And in the people's kitchen, where people sit for dinner, obviously the social was more important than the other two. With that said, then the benefits, the perceived benefits, were also different according to the different initiatives. The food sharing initiative show higher levels of raising environmental awareness. Of course, you get upset when you see these amounts of food waste that are being wasted in the grocery stores. You see them with your eyes. In libraries of things, people acknowledge that they are more inclined to continue sharing, in the sense that Robert probably was saying, like, when you have the experience, that reinforces your practice. And in the people's kitchen, that was more socially oriented, then they had higher perception of value in terms of social cohesion, social capital, and emotions. Happiness was the highest rate. It's not strange. When people meet for dinner, that's the moment where we enjoy most. And what all agreed is that all the initiatives believed, all the participants believed that change is possible. So, and we think this is extremely important in a world of disempowerment, where we feel that we have less and less control over how society looks like. Recovering the hope in that we people can change things is fundamental. So that was highly rated by all kinds of participants.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing on that. And I wonder now, if we simply break it down to what works and what does not work, I wonder which sharing initiatives is it that can be sustained over time? And on the other side, which sharing initiatives is it that do not work? Przemek, if I could maybe start with you here.
Of course, I could point out some critical mass or critical points to sustain the initiative we study, but I think it might be easily generalized. First of all, the crucial role is the local champion or grassroots leadership. Yeah. So in the initiative we study, there are 3 or 4 people, not a one person, which sustained the initiative through years. This is the 6th year the initiative works. So local champion is a really central figure. I think that the second would be shared purpose, and in this particular case, this would be also values. Yeah, so these are people we study for whom food waste is a kind of a moral horror. Yeah, so the approach is we need to prevent any food waste. Also, local context sensitivity. I would point out, and the scalability. But this is more complex issue, so I will stop here. It might help and it might disturb under different circumstances.
Excellent. Thank you, Przemek. Anyone who wants to add to this point? Maria, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I agree quite a lot with what you already said. In a previous work, we have talked about the 3 R's: rational, resources, and relations. And I agree with you that it's kind of a blended rationals, like people are there for sharing a purpose, an ideological purpose, but it could also be that it's mixed with social and economic reasons, etc. And then relations, it's very relational. You might need some people leadering, and then you have the problem of who is continuing taking care of this. And then we have the resources, and this is very interesting because the sharing initiatives use as a resource something that is understood as waste by other people.
Yeah.
And that is fantastic because then they can transform something that doesn't have a value anymore for one person into something valuable for another one, and that provides very many resources. They're very frugal in the way they are. And then we could also talk about why it is reinforced, because the material reward is important in making people coming back. For example, in the case of the repairing things, you save money. In the case of getting food, you get also food. You save some buying new things.
Perfect. Thank you, Maria. And back to Przemek.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to what Maria said. We have not assumed this at the very beginning, also in theoretical background of the project, but it became obvious to us that our participants treat food not as regular commodity. Yes, so and they put into motion the very process of the commodification of food. Yes, so we will include this in academic analysis, yeah, but also in policy recommendations. So this decommodification process might be also generalized to other practices and other streams, and I find it really promising way of alternative thinking, yeah, about commodity and decommodification.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We had, Maria, before I pass it to you, we had a question from Valentin in the chat on, are there, apart from behavioral challenges, are there any formal challenges that prevent people from sharing? Such as regulatory obstacles, which could be addressed by policy makers. And Valentin is here perfectly picking up my question that I had, which is the role of other actors, such as municipalities, housing companies, and other institutions. Please, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, this question cuts straight to the heart of our project, and basically, in our sharing context, our sharing context requires that there are some kind of regulatory change, because we're working against a reality in modern cities where sharing space with your neighbors has become less and less common. At least in the countries that we're studying, Slovenia, the Netherlands, and Sweden, what we see is that, about 100 years ago, people shared all sorts of stuff. It was just kind of out of necessity. No one had a refrigerator in their urban apartment. That was just technologically impossible. People shared toilets with their neighbors. People shared kitchens with their neighbors. Everything was shared in urban spaces. And then, for good reasons, we began to modernize and rationalize the urban environment so that, we had access to sanitary things, bathing and toilets that were a little more, isolated and a little more, not shared by everyone. And then, as this is a very long story, but as we've gotten into basically from the 1990s on, two things have happened. First of all, the incidence of people living alone has increased much faster than any other type of household in Europe, right? So the people living alone represent a very fast growing demographic. And at the same time, because of deregulation of the housing market, what we've seen is that individuals and small households are being provided everything they need in their life, all the infrastructure, all the space they need in their isolated unit. And even if you want to share with your neighbors, it's physically very difficult because there just aren't good sharing opportunities available on the market. So we're very interested in initiatives that reintroduce sharing explicitly in urban development codes and zoning and building regulations. And we're hopeful that we can provide the data to show that people want this. This isn't just a hippie utopia. This is something that people want in their lives. And in good, very recent news in Sweden, the Swedish government just passed an initiative that did all sorts of stuff with the housing market. But one of the things they did is make sharing delningsbostäder, or shared living spaces. It will be easier to rent those out because of some hopefully a new initiative that will become law. We see in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam and in Rotterdam, both of those cities have passed different types of laws that make sharing among neighbors a lot easier. In Amsterdam, they have a vision that I think it's 20% or 10% of all the homes in Amsterdam by 2040 will be residential cooperatives. In Rotterdam, now they have specific design guidelines for sharing with your neighbors. So there's definitely a push toward this, but there needs to be a re-examination of how our building codes make it much easier for us to live alone, and to own all of our own stuff to the exclusion of everyone else. It's a very, very long explanation, but
And thank you for that. So
yeah.
there is a positive turn, but it needs regulatory and market support, as I understand you. And I just want to point out how positive I feel like the turn is we have in this conversation. I hear you speak a lot about people being passionate and a lot of positive potential for change. Maria, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robert, for bringing this structural challenge with us. It's like we need to look backwards. I think when we look backwards in the history of humanity, we will see these decades as a parenthesis in our history, because it is totally unsustainable to live in the way we do, like trying to make meets end. Families living in nuclear homes, trying to make a career, work, and education and things and leisure is an impossible equation. We know that. This is why it's structural, complicated. To come back to some kind of communalism in the way we live, and then we use a much smaller amount of resources for building up our houses. And this is why we have also one of our cases is in Amsterdam. One of the research team has been following a cooperative group that has been designing and building up their own house. We need huge transformations of our legislation. We have countries in Latin America like Uruguay that have been for decades leading an example for how to create a legal environment for cooperative housing. So that is tremendously important. Agree.
If I can add to that, Denmark is a country that has that is very far ahead in Europe when it comes to co-housing, basically facilitating and allowing for neighborhoods to be created where sharing is kind of at the core of those neighborhoods. Denmark has inspired lots of other co-housing movements in other parts of the world. But if you're interested in these types of things, look into what Denmark has done, because they are really the kind of shining example.
Excellent. And I want to piggyback a bit on that inspiration that you talked about, because I wonder now, sharing movements, sharing initiatives, that sounds incredibly local and not top down, but rather much more bottom up. So I do wonder, such initiatives in your experience, can they even be replicated or scaled, one of the two? Christina, if I could maybe pass that to you.
Yes, of course, the questions about the possible scaling up, scaling out, or replicability of this kind of community-based circular economy or sharing economies, I think is a very important one as regard research from a spatial perspective. In our project, this is the role of our partners of the Technical University of Delft. I think it's very important also in terms of policies of how the public actors can differently support these kind of experiences. In my experience, many of the grassroots community-based experiences are not interested very much in scaling up. For instance, scaling up is seen as something that is not relevant or even detrimental for the goal of enhancing relationship. There are many scholars, for instance, in the digital geographies that also observe how digital platform can support these processes of reaching out of these experiences, prefer to speak of proliferation of these experiences, which is not even a replication or transfer, because these experiences must be adapted must be another very, Robert Kitchen, another very famous digital geographer, is speaking of provincializing this kind of digital platforms that support local economies. I think it's very interesting and to me very fascinating to see how different models can be put in place, but for sure scaling up is not the only solution and probably not the most interesting for this kind of, for many of the experience that we are mentioning, that are very much place and context specific.
Excellent. Thank you for pointing that out. And Przemek, your project is called Scale. So I'm curious what you have to say to this.
Exactly the same. Yeah, I can assist here. Our expectations were a bit different, and it turned out after close investigation, which is in our case, this is a action research and participant observation. We assist in many actions of the initiative we study since 8 months. But to the point, yes. So they are really interesting case as they refuse to grow and they refuse deliberately to scale up. Yeah, they defined scaling up, institutionalization as an additional burden, as an administrative burden, and their incentives to do it are lesser than the resources they actually have. Yeah, so I could go more into detail, but this is a kind of a general insight. Yeah, but yes, they try to scale up, scale out, but this is not easy, and there's no ready-made. Yeah, so we also studied unsuccessful scaling out, so horizontal movement, which the role of the local champion was crucial. Yeah, so yeah, and the volunteers fatigue decided not to succeed.
Thank you for this, Maria, please.
Yeah, these are very, very interesting findings. What we observe in the case of the food share in Sweden is that, again, as Christina was saying, the existence of open source digital platforms enables the growth or the expansion of this initiative. So those who have been leading the creation of the food sharing, the Solidarity Fridge in Gothenburg, they are also leading the creation of the food sharing in Sweden and expanding. And it is organized more like a polycentric governance system, I guess, like in the terms of Eleanor Ostrom's terms. And then in our research group, we used to say that maybe we should talk more about how the local government or the government can scale down instead of asking grassroots initiatives to scale up. Then maybe governance systems can scale down and become closer to citizens and to grassroots and to facilitate an environment where these initiatives can grow instead of hindering them, as they usually do. Because and what we observe very often is that local governments are happy to see that they exist, but they are very strict when it comes to the bureaucratic nature of the agreements or the subsidies of the agreements with these organizations. They usually demand impossible things, sometimes even like having a permanent address or delivering results in order to get access to space. It's an impossible thing because these are very loose organizations. So trying to create what we call more incomplete governance could be a way to move forward.
I think these are such interesting points because I think any political, climate, or sustainability conference one attends will talk so much about what are success cases and how can we scale them. And I think these are very important topics then to keep in mind. Here, I would like to pull in the audience also at this stage and ask you to write in the chat if you want, if you have any thoughts to boost sharing initiatives. We need ... We would be very curious to hear your thoughts. And I also saw there was some questions in the chat. We won't have time to take all of them, but I'll just read them out and please all respond if you have some. How successful are exchange rings where an exchange value is given or required compared to free distribution? If anyone feels like they have expertise on that? And what role could insurance repair services play in the sharing of electrical appliances, bicycles, etc., in the event that the product breaks down? If anyone has any reflections on that. Otherwise, I would like to stick to the digital part that was just mentioned and ask, what is the role of digital tools in sharing initiatives? Maybe Christina, do you want to start us off there?
Well, I would like to remind to the fact that in the common language nowadays, when referred to digital platform and sharing economies, nowadays the term sharing economies refers to a big corporate, market-based and profit-oriented platform that have started some decades ago with the community peer-to-peer logic and then turned out to be extremely powerful for-profit platform. Here today we are referring to the original meaning of sharing economies, which is either related to a local, more or less small community, or to a peer-to-peer community that can also be an online community, not physically in the same place. I think that is interesting to distinguish according to the type of community, what can we expect for platforms. As regards online communities, for instance, all the very broad field of commons-based peer production, the free libre open source platform that Maria was mentioning are an extremely interesting and lively field of experimentation and also of reflection of regulatory aspects concerning digital sovereignty and a lot of very interesting and complex topics. While on the other side, and I've also seen that someone in the chat is mentioning some of these examples, digital platforms can also be rethink as something that is oriented to encourage local physical meeting and interaction, such as crowd mapping that give values, makes emerge resources of a territories, and blockchain wallets through which we are trying to do some experimentation and so forth. So it's very important that we make this kind of digital tool emerge that follow very different ownership, code development, and also use logics that big commercial platform that most of us use in our daily work and personal life.
Perfect. Thank you for those comments, Christina. And I just want to acknowledge in the chat, we had some different comments. Amongst other things, the European Economic and Social Committee is meeting and very open to expert views. That's fantastic. We had a comment from Andy saying we need an easy way of accessing resources. Katrin, we need design for social innovation. And a comment by Eleanor about scaling and how that is set up. Thank you all for joining in the chat. And now, Robert, I'm going to give it to you in a moment, but we're almost out of time. Time flies when you get so many fantastic comments from your panelists. So before we end this discussion, I would like to ask each of you to give one thought, and that is one do and one don't when conducting research projects on sharing initiatives. And this time we're not going alphabetical, we'll do the contrary. So Robert, I'll give the word to you.
Okay. To researchers, I would say do mix methods. Triangulate your insights with large quantitative data and in-depth qualitative data. This is proving to be very important to us. And then I would say complementary, don't rely upon either quantitative or qualitative data. Use them both and use them in conversation with one another. I'll leave it at that.
Perfect. And that is hinting to the complexity and the variety, I suppose, that we have spoken about at the start of our conversation. Maria, I would give the word next to you. One do and one don't when conducting research projects on sharing.
Do not reinvent the wheel and study and strengthen what already exists. And then I think we should pay more attention to, as researchers, in rendering the many values that these initiatives generate. And also following on what you were saying before, beyond monetary values, which is something that is quite challenging, because that is what is being asked continuously by politicians and officers. What is the monetary value? We cannot reduce things to money, because then there are many values that fade away.
Excellent. And that is speaking to a variety of co-benefits, I understand, that are not easy to put a certain sum to. I understand. Perfect. Przemek, what do you would like to highlight? And at this stage, also, I want to say it's totally fine to repeat what somebody has said. I know it's hard to always come up with something new. So if you want to say the same thing, that just gives more emphasis. But if you want to say something new, that's fine, of course, as well. And you're on mute, Przemek.
Sorry for that. Always co-design with all the stakeholders from the very beginning and put the mutual learning process into motion. Yeah, these are perhaps two, but yeah, this is our approach.
Perfect. What was there a don't as well that you wanted to add?
I would say that stakeholders, especially communities, local actors, can't feel disengaged. Yeah, this is a recipe for a failure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Christina, last but not least, one do and one don't for research projects on sharing.
My do is quite related to the topic of co-design just mentioned. Is do remember that also research, and especially participatory research and action research, can be a trigger, an activator for these kind of practices. But my don't is the same as Maria. Do not reinvent the wheel. Many of these practices must not be triggered from scratch, but maybe make their value emerge, their existing value emerge and more visible.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. Thank you all. And especially thank you also for our audience for being so fantastic and being so active in the chat. And just seeing the last comment here saying sharing is essential for the future of cities. I couldn't have left it on a better closing comment. We hope that this discussion sparks further conversations in and around your cities. And in a few days, you will find the recording on our YouTube channel. And if you want to learn more about the Urban Lunch Talks, find out about upcoming episodes, make sure to sign up to our newsletter and follow us on LinkedIn. Again, thank you so much for these exciting discussions. I feel like the hour really rushed by, and see you again soon in our upcoming episodes. Thank you.